Also on today, it's crunch time again in post-Brexit negotiations
Wow,
between
okay.
Britain and the European Union. This weekend,
Turn that down. Turn that down. What's good, everybody? Joe Nice, live and direct. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I was on so early. Started up a little bit later than I normally would. You're hearing the dulcet tones of legendary British broadcaster Phil Gale in the background. If you've ever heard an EasyJet, the EasyJet flight instructions, and you know the voice, that's him watching DW News. I wanted to get on here before I have to run some errands and do some other stuff today to talk about the whole Nancy Pelosi stimulus package and her negotiations. Nancy Pelosi is the worst public servant of all time. She's a terrible human being. She's a terrible human being. She's terrible. A month ago, maybe not a month ago, maybe a little bit more than a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, Nancy Pelosi had a $1.8 billion, let me rephrase that, $1.8 trillion with a T, $trillion stimulus package on the books. $1.8 trillion. $1.8 trillion. $1,200 for every single adult. $1,000 for every kid. $400 per week of unemployment benefits, federal unemployment. Retroactive to the expiration of the CARES Act, which expired on July 31, 2020. $1.8 trillion, a $1,200 stimulus check for every adult in the United States, $1,000 for every child, I think, under the age of 15 or 16 in the United States, $400 a week of extra unemployment for every single American that's unemployed, retroactive to the expiration of the CARES Act. And she said, no, that's not enough. That's not enough. So she lets a whole bunch of people go homeless. Lets a bunch of people starve. Lets a bunch of people flop and flail in the wind. Now there's a bipartisan deal on the table. And let me read you the details of the bipartisan deal. And I've got them written down here because I can't remember everything. Okay? The $908 billion, $908 billion. $300 billion for small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program. $300 of unemployment insurance money. $300 per week. And that $300 per week might be retroactive to the beginning of December. So basically 4 days ago. Money for education, $4 billion in student loans. No stimulus checks. Not at all. No stimulus checks. Now, Mitch McConnell was willing to go ahead with that $1.8 trillion deal a couple of months back that the White House and the Senate was like, hey, you know what? Okay, fine. We're willing to work with 1.8. We can do it. Nancy Pelosi was like, no, we're not going to do this. Now, Mitch McConnell goes ahead and says, okay, hey, you know what, Nancy, you don't want to play ball? Okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to put out to the American people. No state money, no local money, 1 month of unemployment, no stimulus checks. Corporate liability shield. Here you go. And again, yesterday when I went live, I said, you know what? India had 250 million people that went on strike, and they're changing their government. They're shifting the balance of power. Their Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is like, okay, 250 million people shutting down everything. Farmers are like, we're not working. Electricians are like, no, we're not working. People in government are like, shit, if we're going to show solidarity, we're not going to work either until this whole situation, this whole neoliberal government changes. And again, we need a workers' strike. I've been saying this for the better part of a year and a half now. I've been saying the United States needs a yellow vest movement. I've been saying it. If you scroll through my Instagram over the past 18 months and you look at all the Saturday pictures and when I was playing shows a year ago, you'll see me wearing a yellow vest and raising awareness about the yellow vest protests in France. And as much as France is truly being shitty to their people right now, the French people are like the French people had 150,000 people in the streets last week protesting the new Security Act, where you can't film police. Nancy Pelosi is going to go ahead and work with this $908 billion. And when I watched her a little bit of her press conference today, she said that the states need money to distribute the vaccines. The states need money to distribute the vaccines. So what essentially Nancy Pelosi is saying is that the vaccines are more important to the economy than actual money in people's pockets is for the economy. That's what she's saying. She's saying a vaccine is better for the economy than money in people's pockets are for the economy. The unemployment numbers were out today, and supposedly unemployment in the United States is 6.7%. I don't believe that number for a second. I don't believe that number for a second. There are three types of unemployed workers in the United States. You have marginally attached workers. Marginally attached workers are people who have looked for work within the past year, but have not looked for work in the past 4 weeks. You have discouraged workers. Discouraged workers are people who are just like, you know what, fuck it, I've stopped looking for work because I'm not qualified for any of these jobs out here, or none of these jobs match my skills, or none of these jobs are for me, or I've been a victim of employer discrimination. And then you have the long-term unemployed. Long-term unemployed are people who have not looked for work in the past 4 weeks. Let me rephrase that. Long-term unemployed are people who have looked for work in the past 4 weeks, but have been out of work for more than 27 weeks. When did this pandemic start, everybody? This pandemic started in the middle of March. Let's say March 14th, 15th. That's when this pandemic began. All right, we're now at December 4. Again, long-term unemployed are people who have looked for a job within the past 4 weeks, but who have been out of work for the last 27 weeks. 27 weeks is essentially 1 week longer than half a year. In 10 days, this pandemic will have lasted 9 months. And 26 weeks is half a year. There's a whole lot of people who are qualify as being long-term unemployed. The long-term unemployed do not count towards the unemployment calculations. Only marginally detached workers and discouraged workers are calculated under the unemployment statistic. And supposedly, the unemployment rate is 6.7%. There is no way in hell the unemployment rate in the United States is 6.7%. Bear in mind, there's a whole lot of seasonal work taking place right now because people have to get their packages delivered. What's going to happen on January 3rd? Shit, what's going to happen on December 27th when people don't need their packages delivered anymore for the holiday season? They're all out of jobs again. Watch in January when I do another one of these videos that the unemployment rate will be up around the quote-unquote real unemployment. The unemployment rate that the government wants you to believe is up around 10 or 11%. These idiots in Congress are still going to be negotiating over a stimulus package. And by then, 30 million people will be evicted and kicked out of their apartments and their houses. Nancy Pelosi is talking about, hey, you know what? We need to do this. We need this. We need a stimulus package. This isn't stimulus. It's a relief package. There's nothing stimulating about making sure that people have the basic necessities to stay alive and stay in their houses and pay their bills and buy food. That's not stimulus. That's relief. That's basic human shit. Basic human business. All of a sudden, that's reclassified as stimulus. And supposedly Nancy Pelosi thinks this is a start to passing other government benefit packages for the unemployed and or underemployed. Let's get this money on the table now. And you know what's going to happen in about 90 days when everybody starts getting vaccinated? The Senate Republicans will have even less incentive to offer any sort of stimulus package or any sort of relief. Because by then the economy will be quote unquote reopened. And then people will say, hey, you know what? Well, jobs are coming back now. We don't need to really spend any more money to make sure that people who lost their jobs through no fault of their own get their jobs back. Something that the unemployment statistics don't discuss is permanent job loss. Permanent job loss. Before this pandemic, I was DJing around the world. You know how many clubs have closed permanently as a result of this pandemic? And permanent isn't, oh, we're going to close for a little bit, but maybe in about a year we'll come back. No. Permanent means, yo, that shit's gone and it's gone forever and it's not coming back. How many jobs have been lost as a result of this pandemic? Permanent job loss. And permanent job loss is not calculated in the unemployment statistics at all. Again, I'm in North Carolina right now. If I were still living in Baltimore, I would see I would gather as many people as I could, and I would be protesting in front of Nancy Pelosi's house in Washington, D.C. And I think that is what we need right now. We need mass protests in the streets. Again, because if 250 million people in India can essentially bring that country to its knees, I'm not saying we need 1/4 of the United States population to do the same thing, because 1/4 of the United States population is about 80 million people, or essentially twice the size of the population of California. And I'm not even convinced we need 80 million people to bring this country to a screeching halt. I'm not even convinced of that. Imagine if package deliverers in the state of California said, you know what, we're going on strike. Imagine if every grocery store worker in California, just California, and I'm purposely saying California. Imagine if every grocery store worker in California said, you know what, we're not messing with produce today. You see that Roquefort cheese in that box? It's got to get on the shelf. It's going to stay in that box. Yeah, you see those cases of linguine that got to go in aisle 7 with next to the pasta and the sauce? Nah, it's in the boxes. Leave it on the truck. We're on strike. Well, that's salami and bologna and all that other deli meat. We're not slicing any of that. Nope. All these birthday cakes. I'm not baking any of them either. Could you imagine if every grocery worker in California just didn't show up? And you had a handful of people that said, hey, you know what? We're not doing anything until the government makes sure that we get taken care of. You know how much shit would get done in Washington, D.C.? And again, I'm purposely picking California. Because California, on its own, has the 5th largest economy based on gross domestic product in the world. California has a bigger economy than Russia. Could you imagine if a similar workers' movement took place in Texas? If a bunch of garbage collectors in Texas said, you know what, now we're not picking up the trash. Nope, sorry. Could you imagine if all these dudes that are working on a ranch said, you know what, I see all these cattle, we're gonna let them run free. And if they run into a car on I-35 and total your car, sorry be it, sorry. Could you imagine what could happen if 1 million people in Texas just said, you know what, we're not doing anything today. And we're going to stay off the job. And we're going to stay off the job until Washington does right by us. I'm not asking for 25% of the population like in India to shut it down, although that would be excellent. I'm not even asking for 40 million. Or even 4 million. Could you imagine if 1 million people, 1 million people just said, you know what, we're not doing this. I'm going to shut this whole thing down. 1 million. You would bring this country to its knees. And then and the government would have to start responding on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican. And the crime in all of this, as crazy as this election cycle was, this is the easiest election to ever win. Ever. Because all either Joe Biden or Donald Trump had to say at either of their Democratic or the Republican National Convention speeches was, hey, I'm either Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And here's what I'm going to do for you. I'll put money in your pocket. I'll keep you in your house. I'll eliminate your student loans, and I'll give you health care. Essentially, populist ideas that both Democrats, Republicans, and independents can agree on. And neither of them wanted to do that for the American people. Neither party wanted to do any of that stuff. And I guarantee you, and again, I am not a Donald Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's a repulsive and repugnant human being. And I think he barely qualifies as a human being. But I guarantee you, if he had come out in May or June of this year, about a month before the CARES Act, about 6 to 8 weeks before the CARES Act was about to expire, and say, hey, you know what? We need to negotiate a new CARES Act because this money's going to run out in July at the end of next month. This money's going to run out, and we need to make sure we take care of the American people. And I don't think what we did was enough. Let's put more money on the table. Could you imagine if Donald Trump had called Nancy Pelosi's bluff and said, hey, you know what? I want a $4 trillion package. Mitch McConnell would have been like, we can't do that. And Nancy Pelosi would be like, oh, $4 trillion is a bit much. Maybe we could negotiate with the Republicans. But because of Nancy Pelosi's hubris and arrogance, there's millions of people that are going to be wondering where their next $20 is coming from. There's millions of people that are going to be waiting at a food bank for a box of groceries. There's millions of people that are going to go without health care for the foreseeable future. All because Nancy Pelosi hates Donald Trump. And again, I want to be crystal clear when I say this. I do not like Donald Trump. I think he's a repulsive and repugnant human being. And as I said about a minute and a half ago, I think he barely qualifies as a human being. But the last time I checked, he didn't come out in a press conference and say, you know what, it was my plan to delay negotiations for negotiating the stimulus. Nancy Pelosi said that. She said that about 4 hours ago. She said that. It was my plan to delay negotiations for the stimulus package. Trump didn't say that. Trump was tweeting, hey, you know what? Hey, go big, go big. Let's get a stimulus deal done. Let's go, let's go. But Trump isn't blameless in any of this either. Because he's the most powerful person in the Republican Party and the most powerful person in the United States government, or at least so we thought he was. And all he had to do was tie the political futures of those that disagreed with him against him. All he had to do is say, hey, look, I'm going to push ahead. I'm going to push this stimulus package through, whether you like it or not. And if you don't vote with me, if you don't agree with me, I will make sure you don't get reelected. What do you think none of these boot-licking, milquetoast Republicans in the Senate would have done? They would have capitulated, rolled over, and said, yep, okay, if Trump wants it, we'll do it. But Trump is an idiot and has no idea how to govern. No idea how to negotiate. Because that's all he had to do. All he had to do was come out and say, hey, look, any of you senators that are up for re-election, you don't ride with me on this Senate bill, you're toast. You're done. And I won't endorse you. I won't endorse you. And the most valuable commodity in politics back then was a Trump endorsement, especially when you're seeking re-election. That's all he had to do. All he had to do was say, "Yeah, oh, you know what? Oh, you're not right. You're not going with me on this Senate bill. Okay, see this Democrat? I'll pump him up or her up. You won't win this election. You're done. And good luck getting a job somewhere else in Washington, D.C." That's all he had to do. And if you had to pit a senator who is up for re-election's political future in the balance because they didn't want to vote on a stimulus package, they would have voted for it. And all Trump had to do was call Nancy Pelosi's bluff. It's all he had to do. This jackass wrote a book called Art of the Deal. Where's your art of the deal? Where's the deal? It's all he had to do. Call her bluff. Pelosi would have been stressed out. McConnell was up for re-election. Remember that. McConnell was running against Jamie Harrison. And for everything that Trump said, Trump didn't want to play political hardball that was necessary to push this stimulus package through or to do any sort of governance. And then you let idiots like Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Kevin McCarthy, Lindsey Graham, and Mitch McConnell take over the country. They are bought, leased, sold, and paid for by corporate America. Thanks to everybody that watched this. I don't have much more to say. Stay healthy. Please stay safe. Thank you again for all your support. I appreciate each and every one of you.